Meeting is recording. Okay, I think it started. I just get a mic check, and you can see VS Code on the left and our course website on the right. Okay, thank you. Um, so last time we finished up to this part where we modified our Django application to work with Heroku, and we were able to essentially get to a real Django error. And this is talking to um, the database. The SQLite database hasn't been migrated, but we can't really use SQLite um, because each time we deploy um, our development database, will get um, packaged with the image, and so then it will always overwrite the production database when we push the image. So we need to integrate Postgres with our Django application and use Heroku's Postgres on production. So we'll have a Postgres container locally for development, and Heroku will provide a Postgres database on the production side. So yeah, that's what we'll do today. I should have logged into Heroku beforehand, but let me just do that now. Okay. And this is our app here. So you've already kind of seen how to add Postgres, a Postgres container locally with Docker Compose. And then once we do it locally, um, then we need to do the same thing on Heroku. And Heroku has their own, like an add-on. So that's what we'll eventually do. That's more or less the outline. And then this is kind of like the cheat sheet, the actual steps. Okay. So again, we'll be adding this. And then this is how Django knows how to talk to a database. And then after that, um, we'll do it on Heroku. All right, so let's do it. Okay, start Docker. Um, modify for Heroku. So yeah, let's make a new branch, add PostgreSQL, and so the first thing is always our Docker Compose. That's how we inject containers in. Uh, Okay, so we're gonna add a new service. Call this service database. And then we're gonna use the image from Docker Hub, the official Postgres image, and the current version is 11.12. I think I've already shown you how to access it through Docker Hub when we went over Postgres. So I'll skip that portion. And if you remember, when we did the Postgres exercise, Postgres needed us to provide some environment variables to kind of configure the database. So we can do that here. And then again, yeah, we already went over why using a database, using a file to capture your environment variables is a little bit better in terms of managing, so you can kind of group them together. And instead of listing it one by one in this Docker Compose YML using this setting. And then, so let's do that. I guess we do need to visit Docker Hub because I forgot the name of the environment variables that we need. So I believe it was the first key here. We need to set password. User and the database. And I think we had magical password last time. This time we'll just use the my site as the password. And this was the unicorn user last time. We'll just say my site application is the user. And then we'll say my site development as the name of the database. Okay. So this is kind of good if you were to manage your own database in production. If you have it, kind of give yourself a clue. Sometimes when you're in the command line, you don't know which system you're on, and you don't want to accidentally run some code that's meant for development on production. And having this might alert you to like, hey, you're not actually on the production database right now. So I've seen other frameworks do it, and I'm guessing that's the reason. Okay, so once we have that, we should be able to configure our database. And then I guess some foreshadowing. The same credentials that's listed in this database YML to configure Postgres will also need to be injected into our application so that it knows how to authenticate against the database. So that's why it's good to kind of group it so you can then reuse it and it avoids some duplication. Okay. In this example, it's not a huge savings, but things can quickly grow and escalate. Let's see. So we have the database. We do a Docker Compose up. Database is up. Containers up, but the application is up. But applications using SQLite. So the next thing is to configure our our application to use this Postgres that's in a different container. So in the Django documentation, there's a part about databases, and Postgres is pretty popular. They even have an example code for Postgres here. So we can do this. We'll go to our settings file, and then modify the current database setting, which is configured for SQLite. So we won't need this anymore. And you'll notice that it's trying to connect to a database, but it can't find it. So if you see this connection error, then the suspect would be that you configure your database correctly, or your database connection properly. Okay, so if we delete this SQLite file now, it should no longer be automatically generated by Django when it starts up. Okay, so let's slowly hard code this in. So our database is on a host name database because that's how Docker Compose does it. It runs each container and runs the container, allows the container to be reachable by their service name. So we do this, we should get a different error. So now it's able to connect to the database, but it fails the authentication because the user we're providing is not the same as what we've set the database container to be at. So let's do that. So my site password, my site app, and my site development. Okay. My site password, my site application is the user, and the name of the database, my site development. So now we actually connect to the database, and if we're to do localhost 8001, and you see the familiar table error. I guess they call it a relation. So to fix that, we do what we normally do. We drop into the application container and run our migrations. And then hopefully that will allow us to start using our local Postgres database from within a container. Okay, so this actually is good enough because Heroku would then override it with this library that they provided. If you remember one of the documentations Heroku provided, there was a library they provided, and this library will kind of help you configure your Django app for allowed hosts, which is what the first error we encountered, but we'll also do it for the databases. So what we've done is good enough because these hard-coded values for development will get overwritten. But you're not always going to be using Heroku, so I just want to go through this one part here. and that's that um, with containers and cloud, you want everything to be configurable by environment variables. So here is how we can inject these environment variables into the container and then use it to configure our Django application. So we'll actually take this bit of code, oh, why? And I hope there's no tabs. Okay, so these are all redundant. So now we actually got to set these environment variables. Again, right now we have our port set because of this. Now we can actually reuse this and have these environment variables set. So that'll take care of 3 of the 5. So we were to exit, jump back in, check our environment variables. You'll see that our Postgres password is set. Postgres user is set, and Postgres database is set. So now we just have to provide these remaining 2. So if we have the choice, we can put it in here or here, but the database will never need to know these settings, so we'll put it into our just into our application. Okay. So again, the host that the application needs to, the host name that the application needs to use to reach the database is database based on the .compose.yml, and the port is 5432. That's the default Postgres port, which is also configurable, but we'll just stick with the defaults. Okay, so now if we exit and jump back in, check out env, we should have the database port set, as well as the database host name, and then again, the other Postgres variables are here as well. User, database name, and password. Okay, so if we weren't using Heroku and this wasn't available, all the other hosting platforms, cloud environments, they should allow you to inject environment variables. So you'll be able to configure this Django external to the container. All right, so we have bootstrap. So we'll just down everything. I guess one other thing we should do is, if you remember how to persist data between containers spinning up and down, you still need to do that. All right. So now we down, and then bring it back up. Okay, database. Oh, I forgot to import OS. So we're using this library. It's built into Python. So we can do that. Spin it back up. All right, so the app is up, and it seems to have connected to our database. And if we were to check it, we'll have the same error that we can fix by migrating. This is the same error we'll see on Heroku side, so we'll be really comfortable migrating. All right, so in development, everything's working. So the last bit of business is to push it to Heroku and configure Heroku to use Postgres. All right. So this one is done. This one still has the error, but that's SQLite. Okay. So we're on this step here. So let's push it and see it fail, and then see it get fixed. Okay, so these were the commands. We're gonna build our app, our image, and push it to Heroku. And again, luckily, caching is really good with containers, so we're not always waiting. And then we'll tell Heroku to release it. I guess before we do, I should tail the logs, so we don't need this anymore. And I'm gonna use my screen multiplexer so I can see the logs across the screen. Okay. Get rid of that, more space. So let's do Heroku logs tail, follow the logs, and then now let's release it. Ah, so that's nice. It actually told you that you might need to migrate. Okay. It's exiting, starting back up, and we should see an error. Yeah. So in our settings file, when Django starts up, it loads these configurations, and it's trying to configure this bit, but it doesn't have an environment variable, PostgreSDB set, so it crashes. And how we configure that would be, I think you can do it through the Heroku command line, but I think it's just easier using, for this portion, to use the web interface. Yeah, config environment variables for app. It's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so settings, I think. Config variables. And right now there's nothing. So if we do one just to see and add that, I think Heroku knows that when you change the configuration, it'll restart it. So because we set the config, it's going to restart the image, and hopefully that'll fix that error. And eventually we'll need to do it for all of them. And we don't want to hardcode a value because that's dynamically provided by Heroku, which gets picked up here. So this is just to avoid this error. And I guess if we had hard-coded the development environment variables, we wouldn't run into this issue, but I think it's good to know about environment variables. Okay, so it moved on to the next error. So I'm just gonna do all of them at once and not wait. But each time I do it, they still will restart. All right. So again, these are supposed to be sensitive production credentials, so you don't really want to have it in your Git or freely available online somehow. Okay, so it's running through. It started a few in parallel possibly. So hopefully after everything, it'll give us a different error. So this looks interesting. Let's see now. Okay. Supply the name value. Yeah. So that's good because we didn't really give it any value. So the app is running, but it doesn't know how to connect to a database because we haven't given a database yet. So now let's tell Heroku to make a database for us. So resources. Again, you can do add-ons from the command line. I guess it will. Let me just quickly show that. So here's add-ons, and let's see if we can quickly see configs. Heroku configs. Oh. So here it shows the ones we set, and then if we do add-ons, it's blank. And this is the part where you might actually get charged, so I would advise you doing it from the web UI until you're comfortable. Okay, so this should be a free plan, and then once we submit, it will get added. And once we added the add-on, it's also going to restart again. So again, well, I guess I should have shown the other plans. Let's see if you can see it. So yeah, here's the other plans. So it can go up to be pretty significant. Data is very important. So choose the free one. And then if we go check out add-ons, we can see it there. And the other thing is this add-on created another environment variable. And you can also see that here. So this is your actual real production production credentials here. So let's just take a look. Again, you don't. If you had a real app, you wouldn't want to share this with anyone or have it available online. So these URLs, you start out with the protocol, and then this is the username. Let's see. Maybe, yeah. So this Postgres portion is the protocol, and this hash of characters is username. And this is the actual password. And then this portion here, you can see it kind of almost resembles an IP address. It's the host name. Oh wait. So this resembles the IP, but this is actually the entire host name. And then here's your port. And then lastly, this is your database name. Oops, don't want to save. Okay, so that's what all that means. So again, your username and password and sensitive information is here. So just be careful. I mean, these are all play apps, so I don't think it matters, but just be aware of that fact. And this is the database. This database URL is what I suspect is this library is going to key in on, and then based on that, parse it, and then override these settings. So now, if we go to our app, it's able to connect to a database, but of course we need to migrate. Okay, so let's go drop into our container. So now we're in our container on Heroku, and okay. And here's our updated database config. I mean the settings, and I guess a tab did get sneaked in. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I did there. Okay, so again, should be very familiar by now. We're gonna migrate our database. And now, if we go hit our application of Heroku, the database is ready. And each time you deploy, this database will not be affected. And this is publicly available for anyone. So if you were to do it from your home now, you'll be able to reach this and interact with it. And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything to clean up. So yeah, I guess one good check is make sure you don't see any prices, that you didn't add anything and get charged for it, because then I'll feel really bad. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here. Unless there's questions, and I'll ask for questions later. And then my audio's been cut out. Um, so I do want to ask um, something. So don't drop off yet. But I'll see you on the other side. Okay, stop this.